Hello, hello. Welcome, friends. Welcome to Adobe Live. I am back here with my good friend, Ashley Batz. This is day number 2 of some photo editing magic that we're going to get into. Yesterday, we worked on some Photoshop. Today, we're going to work on a little bit of Lightroom and possibly get into Photoshop again. But before I get into Ashley's introduction, I just want to go over our housekeeping items that we always need to go through. So first of all, let's have a look at that schedule. All right, here it is. So today we are live right now with Ashley Batz at 9:30 a.m. All these times are Pacific time. Then we have that Illustrator Daily Creative Challenge, editorial design with Angela at noon. Then the XD Daily Creative Challenge followed by the Draw Along, and of course a creative encore to cap us out at the end of the day. Now remember, again, these creative Hey, no intro, don't play. These creative encores are sort of a watch party, right? So they are pre-recorded streams, but we are watching them with an open chat. So just a heads up about that. All right, Ashley, I've done enough talking. Hello, welcome again. Hi.
Hello, hello.
Who are you? Let us know who you are, what you do, and what we have in store for today.
Oh, I'm so excited. Well, I'm a photographer. I've been working for the past decade shooting people, products, all kinds of crazy stuff. And I am now currently in the Bay Area. And here's a little taste of a little new website that I'm working on.
Cool.
So,
Let's hop onto your screen. We're on it now.
yeah, lots of people obsessed, in fact, with people. And during this little shelter in place, you'll see some of my virtual shoots, like this one on the right-hand side. So these are all shot through FaceTime or Zoom or a computer screen. So that's
no way.
fun.
These shots we're looking at right now, these are via Zoom?
Yeah.
How fun.
This one on the right-hand side.
Yeah. Talk about doing virtual work. That is very impressive.
Yeah. You got to do a lot with a little, as I like to say. This is the U.S. women's soccer team. But yeah, I've actually been playing around with making a new website just to change my brain up a bit. This is another virtual shoot. But yeah, a lot of people. Almost no product these days, but very obsessed with looking at people's faces.
Ooh, I see some celebrities here.
Oh yeah, we got ScarJo.
ScarJo. The guy from Stranger Things, I forget his name.
Yep.
And you shot these people personally?
I did.
Nice. How cool.
I know. So it's been fun. It's been a fun past decade or so. And I really found that I love color. So I'm really leaning into that these days, which is really fun. To start learning about yourself, this is one of my favorite shots.
That's a great shot.
Thank you.
Those lights definitely lead you towards that person. It kind of like falls right on them.
Yeah. Happy accidents.
Happy accidents. That's a great shot right there. I love that one too.
Thank you so much.
Great light.
So yeah, I mean, I feel like I work in a lot of different ways. My style flexes across a broad range. So I feel like I try a little bit of everything.
Sweet. It looks awesome.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm going to zoom right back up.
Cool. And just looking at the chat, I have not said hello to you all, but welcome everybody in the chat. Thank you so much for joining us. I see Sydney, I see Wade, Sean, General Kenobi, Andreas Holler. Hey, how you doing, man? Philippe, Marsha, Ferry, Abigail, Emma, John, Khalid. Wow, we got all sorts of people in the chat. Thank you so much for joining us. Let us know where you're tuning in from. Ashley and I are based out of the Bay Area, so it is nice and sunny here today, but let us know where you're tuning in from. All right,
Yeah,
with that
and I
being
want to know. I was
Yeah,
gonna
sorry,
say
go
I
ahead.
want to know where the weather is. What's your weather where you are?
Yeah, let us know. Cool. So shall we get into it?
Yes, we should. Are you ready?
Let's do it. Let us know what we have in store today.
So, this is a little bit of a continuation from yesterday, and I'm calling it a little bit of a Tarantino effect, but we're going backwards and talking about the project that I did a few months ago, kind of in the thick of the pandemic here in San Francisco. I was feeling really isolated and alone, even though I had my lovely husband, which was really wonderful, but definitely missing human connection, people. And where we live in San Francisco, it's a very busy street. And at that moment, it was completely quiet. And I am not a landscape photographer by any means, but I really wanted to see what it was like to shoot this empty street with a subject, which ended up being my husband. So, are you following me? Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah.
Great. So, on the way to creating this project, I actually did some homework and I created a mood board.
Mood
So here
board.
we are. I know, love a mood board.
Gotta have them.
So,
Really gives you
I
the right
know.
direction to start a project. So highly recommend doing them.
Yes, and I 100% encourage you to always be looking at images, especially ones that are not even of your era, of your modern time. I think it's really important to see what's been done before and then maybe see how you can implement that into the work that you create today. So I was looking at all kinds of images about what's it like to be in a city, architecture, people, folks that might be a little bit more nondescript, like what's the silhouette look like? What does it feel like? What does it feel like to be empty? And this is kind of the rabbit hole that I went down in just Pinterest. But it really started with looking at black and white images of cities that were more empty.
Yeah, this came out great. This definitely gave us a sense of direction on how to approach that edit yesterday. And I think it did a great job in sticking to the theme.
Yeah. So again, this really helped me formulate my ideas by being able to see what other people have done in the past.
Yeah.
And once you look at that and then you think about what you have in front of yourself, then you can start to formulate your own ideas. And something that I did know logistically was that I was going to be standing in our apartment looking down on the street. So then I started really looking at these more bird's eye view images. And I feel like we could talk about this one very specifically, but I just love the lines of the concrete, the leading lines of the stairs, the shadows, and the fact that there's just two people here in really interesting parts of the frame feels really dynamic to me.
Yep, agreed.
And then I know you liked this one.
Yeah, I did.
Which is not what I was going to do, but I just found it really interesting too.
Yeah, I did too. I think the perspective is kind of what's thrown at me. It's just bottom up. Cool. Looking at the chat real quick, we have some people chiming in where they're from. We got Indonesia, Los Angeles, India, Kentucky, Greece. Jean-Eric, of course, our punny guy, says, I'm tuning in from tab number 4 in Google Chrome version 870.4 official build. Nice.
Amazing.
And
Good
then Hugh
information.
O'Connor saying, looking out the window, I see my weather is the same as in Paco's neighborhood. Does that mean you're an
Ooh.
SF, my friend? It could be. And then we have Marco joining in from Egypt, Maryland,
Wow.
and all sorts of places. Nice. Thank you all for letting us know where you're at.
Aw, that's so cool. I love this. Yeah, so we made a mood board and it helped me come up with maybe what I was going to do.
100%. Yeah, and it's great for inspiration. I mean, there's so many tools to try and get that collection of inspiration. Pinterest being one of them. A lot of people use Instagram. Behance is another great source. So it's definitely, I'd say, a key in the process. It's just looking at inspiration to see what it is that you want to do, or kind of give you that guiding light on how to approach the project.
Absolutely. And something that mentors have told me over the years is the more you look at images, the more you can come up with how you want to shoot something, or what you like, or maybe you see a lighting technique that maybe you want to learn. So to see things, you can come up with your own ideas too.
Definitely.
All right, how should we do this? Should we open up the shoot that I did, or do you want to see a little taste of the final product?
Final product as in what we did yesterday?
Mm-hmm.
I'll leave it up to you. What do you think?
I don't know.
You're driving the show.
I know.
Well, why don't we show the final edit of what we did yesterday, so people can see the completed version of it, and then juxtapose it to this mood board. And then in the chat, you can let us know if you think that this final edit fit towards the inspiration that the mood board is in front of us.
Ooh, okay, that's great. I think that's a good idea.
Cool, let's do it. There it is.
Here is what we worked on yesterday. Wow.
Yeah, this came out great. Again, I just love the birds there. Happy accidents, as we learned yesterday. It's not like she was waiting for hours for the perfect birds to fly by, but they happened to get in the shot and definitely use towards the advantage of the photo.
Yeah.
Of course, the focal point is your wonderful husband and that very out of place geometric shape that our eyes are just insanely drawn to.
Yeah, exactly. So we worked on this yesterday for a couple of hours, and I thought part of the process of coming to this exact moment is not only the mood board and the prep work that you do, but it's also culling through the shoot and really considering what that image could look like. And so what I like to do is pull everything into Bridge, do a little bit of a rating scenario so that I can cull through before opening them into Lightroom. Sometimes, if I don't have time, I will open everything into Lightroom, but I feel like that's too much work. I feel like you're editing things that you don't need to edit. So we'll pull in the right ones to Lightroom, and then we'll try a couple of different options for each before we decide to actually open our last and final image into Photoshop.
Nice. Yeah, so let us know, chat. What do you think of this final edit and how it related to the mood board that we initially set out to kind of guide us as the inspiration? So again, it'll take a couple seconds till we start seeing those responses, but right, maybe we can pull up the mood board real quick again so people get a quick flash of the inspiration and the end result.
I know we live in the future, so I understand.
We're living in the future present. So bad.
All those past people.
Cool. Looking at the chat real quick. We do have a question about cameras that I'm just going to throw out real quick. Hugh O'Connor's asking, what are your thoughts on the Leica monochromatic cameras?
I actually don't know much about the Leica cameras, but I think Annie Leibovitz said it best, that the camera in your hand is the best camera that you could have. So I'm sure it's great. I've heard great things about Leicas. So I'm shooting on a Canon 5D Mark IV, but I also shoot on tiny cameras, on 35 millimeter film cameras, on medium format digital and film cameras as well. So everything is just to taste what you're wanting to use in the moment.
Yeah, I love that quote. The camera in your hand is the best one. I think a lot of people, especially when trying to start out photography, get caught up that they need to have the right tool for the job, or they start going down this black hole on what camera they should get. And going off of that quote, my advice is just start shooting. I mean, almost everybody has a camera these days if you have a smartphone. So when you start shooting with your smartphone, maybe even get a cheaper or secondhand camera. And I think once you start doing it more, assuming you start to invest in it more, then you start to get an idea of what equipment you want to invest in. It'll give you more of an educated decision in terms of whether you want to shoot landscape or portraits. Do you want to buy lenses that are more towards architecture? And I think you just got to start first and then make more educated decisions based off of that.
I absolutely agree with that. And, this is a decade in with my own work. And I started out with, secondhand cameras as well. And just learning that system and seeing what I could do with just the camera in my hand was really powerful. And then you start to understand what you need. And for example, I just shot a Pepsi thing the other day where I needed a digital medium format camera, and that was so that we could crop in without losing the image and all kinds of good stuff. So once you get to know that too, then you meet the technical skill that you have with the tools that you also need.
For sure.
Yeah.
Cool, right on. So let's keep on chugging along. While you get into the next segment, we do have some comments relating to what we asked. Golden Rose is saying, I like that he's standing alone in the area with all of the darkness around the rectangle. Agreed. I think that definitely was the goal, is to make that stand out, make it the focal point. Karen says, it relates very well to the setting and lighting ideas that you were playing with and contrasts. Marsha saying, how's that utopian lost look as your mood board?
Yeah.
Wait, saying
exactly.
I agree. Yeah, good stuff.
Yeah, and something I even forgot to mention yesterday is that if you are going to use natural light, which this is, I suggest finding the time of day that matches with what you're hoping to get. So for me, this high noon, hard shadow type of light was exactly what I wanted, so that I could get a long shadow from my husband or the shadows from the birds flying by or even the parking meters. So just some things to consider as you're doing your project, and don't be afraid to try the same thing in different amounts of light just to see what resonates with you the most.
Yeah. Great comment. That was actually a question in our chat. They were asking, when was this taken? Around noon, ? Which you just answered.
Exactly.
Sweet.
All right. Well, I'm going to open up what I shot in Bridge.
Cool.
And so, it's really interesting. As I was looking back through these, my original intent was to maybe shoot something around this intersection. So very interesting to look back and say, okay, let's try here. I think this is the shot. So we'll just briefly look through those. And I was like,
it's like a little movie watching them move around.
Like a little flip book.
Yeah.
So I was so sure that this was going to be the shot. And as I started to look at it, I thought that maybe it was a bit more distracting, and there's too many things, still too many cars, even though the street is completely empty still. It still wasn't doing it for me. So he actually had the great idea, as he walked over my way, as you'll see in a second, to come to this. So again, it wasn't as planned as I thought it was. And this was our little happy accident.
I feel like that happens so much when you're shooting. A lot of times you set out to shoot something, or in the moment you feel like you're shooting the right thing. But the wonderful thing about digital cameras these days is you can just shoot so many times because it's all digital. It's not like you have a finite amount of film that you're going to run out of. But I've also caught myself finding, while looking through the photos through Adobe Bridge or through Lightroom or just even through Finder, that a shot that I didn't even think would work ends up being my favorite. And I think that's the beauty of just shooting digital is, I would say err on the side of shooting more. It's better to have more photos to cull through than have almost no photos, and then you realize you didn't even get the shot you wanted. And here's a great example of that.
Yeah. So my goal in Bridge today is to identify some images that I will want to pull into Lightroom. And I think for the project today, we'll pull one of these in just so that we can see the difference once I put a little bit of a treatment on it. But I do know that once I saw these versus the others, that I wanted to go in that direction. So yeah. And the cool thing about Bridge is that you can check all of the apertures that you shot at and the focal lengths. which I found to be really helpful, even just for me for the future. So, I tend to shoot at, this one is at 11, f11, but, or I'm usually at 50 or whatever that is. So really interesting for you to think about for your next project too.
Awesome.
So I'm just going to go through and do a really quick edit, and I'm going to go with my gut. I'm going to, make some quick decisions. And I think as you progress in your craft as well, you'll be able to know what resonates with you more than anything. So I'm going to 1-star everything, and then we'll go back and 5-star the ones that we actually want to bring in. How's that sound?
Let's do it.
So Command 1 will 1-star it for you. So I'm gonna pull that one in. I know that that's not where we're going, but I'm curious anyways. So I'm going through, kind of like that walk too, actually. And now we're on this very mysterious piece of metal. So I'm gonna 1-star that. I like his stance. His feet are apart. His shadows in a cool way. It's almost perpendicular to the red line or parallel to the red line that we're looking at. And then I like this one because his arm's a little bit closer than that, maybe a little less light on it. This one's great. This one seemed to open up a bit more, which I love. And then I'm just still looking for anything. So in this one, I noticed that there is a bird, and I was like, oh, well, maybe I can bring those in later. So I'm just gonna 1-star that for now. And here's another bird, and here's 2 more. So I'm gonna just 1-star that. And I'm gonna say this one too, just in case if I wanna add that in. A lot of birds going by, just for a moment. There's a nice shadow on the ground here with the bird. And I've really trained my eye to take in the scene as quickly as possible so I can make those gut decisions. So this one's great too. And that's the end of our very quick set. I knew what I wanted to do. We made a quick decision, and then we went for it.
We did it.
Yeah.
So I think this is an important part of the photo editing process, right? You're obviously going to have many shots that are hovering around what it is you're trying to achieve. And when we start culling, this is what we're doing. We're culling images and picking the selects. Once you've done this for a while, you start to get a feel of what you know personally. I mean, there's no right or wrong answer, right? What works for somebody may not work for another person. So you just go through them really quickly, and you just make gut decisions on what works and what doesn't. And that's what we just saw Ashley do.
Yeah. So now I'm going to check my 1-stars. And so on the left-hand side here, I can filter by rating. So there's only 1 rating, and there's 11 of them. So now I can go into this and narrow down even more. And usually in a project, I'm narrowing down a lot more, but because this is such a specific project that I knew I wanted 1 image, I shot a little bit less, but I still want to take myself through that process. So sometimes I'll even take it and look at it a little bit bigger, even if it's in the film strip here, just so I can take a quick look and see what my gut reaction might be. But between these two, I mean, it's more empty on the left-hand side, but I do like his walk on the right-hand side. And I think that I'd love to try maybe leaving this one on the right-hand side. Again, I know it's not where it's going, but, and I accidentally started both of them. Let's go back to 1 on that. Great. So now here we go. I'm gonna pick maybe 3 up and just take a quick look. And it's all about those nuances. And I think you'll start noticing when you're you're looking through your images, what are the little things that you want to be part of your dialogue? So
Right.
the thing that I noticed the most was on the left-hand side, there's a little bit of light on his right hand versus the others, and just a little bit of a posture change. So for my own taste and preferences, I'm gonna pick one out of these. And for me, it's this middle one. It's like a really straight up and down stance. I love where the shadow is. I don't necessarily need any highlights on camera left, so on his right-hand side. So I'm going to pick that as my 5-star.
Cool.
And to do that, it's Command 5. And it moves it over to that other rating, so you won't see it. And then again, let's pick 3 up here.
This is a great workflow. Just it's one thing just doing a first pass, but when you start to put them together in one screen so you can really look at those fine nuances that we're looking at, I think that's really when you start to like pick that golden winner just by comparing them to all the other ones that look alike.
Yeah, totally. Especially for something very specific. And
Right.
I shoot a lot of product where the prop stylist might change something ever so slightly. So to be able to look at something and make those decisions is, I think, really important for yourself.
For sure.
So I'm going to keep the one on the left and the one on the right-hand side. I really love his stance on the left-hand side. And then on the right-hand side, I know that I definitely want that bird to be added in. I think the bird in the middle image is not showing up so well, so I'm just going to leave that one. So I'm going to Command 5 that one and that one. And now we're going to look again, 3 up. And again, I feel like the birds in the left-hand image on 953 will be more helpful to me than the other one. I feel like it's overlapping with maybe that tar a little bit too much, and you won't be able to see it, won't have much of a payoff.
Nice.
And then last 3 up.
Last 3.
Same thing.
So what are we thinking
Great.
here? Why would one of these photos work as opposed to the other?
You know, I feel like this one on the right-hand side, 958, is very similar to one that I've already chose and like. So I don't see the need to bring it in. So now that we've culled it down to 5 images, I'm just going to take a quick peek here and see how that feels.
Well, you look at that. We have a question from the chat. Asking why use Bridge for this?
Well, there's a number of things that you can use, but I really think that it's important to have your own spaces to do very specific tasks. So, for example, it's really important for you to eat your dinner in the kitchen, or and then, you know, everyone says don't watch TV in your bedroom. So I know we all do that. So anyways, I think it's really important for your process to open something where maybe you can't do editing yet. I think it's really great to slow down, take a look, because if I just threw it into Lightroom, I would immediately want to edit all of these images. And I think for my process, that's really not going to be helpful in the end.
Yeah. Great answer. It's the right tool for her workflow. So there are many ways to do this. May not be Bridge, could be another app, but for Ashley's specific workflow, this is the right tool for the job. And I think that was a great thing saying about if you fire up Lightroom, you're just going to get into editing, because that's exactly what I do as well. As soon as Lightroom is up, I just hit D, go to the develop module, and I didn't even cull or look at all the other photos. So
right.
Great insights.
And then you're like, oh my God, I'm editing 1,000 photos. I don't need to do that. So
great way to control that eagerness to edit.
Yeah. So the last thing I'm doing is just looking between these two, because this one is just for the pigeon and the pigeon. So I'm just taking a quick look real fast to decide what I want. And then I'm going to move on. So I don't know what it is about his stance on the right-hand side, but that's what I'm going for. And again,
it speaks to you.
Yep, so I'm gonna 1-star it again. And now these are my 5 stars.
Nice.
And the other cool thing about Bridge is that you could open this up again and still see that rating, so that you can always come back to things and just review the work that you've done, and maybe change it up as you change your mind over time too. So let's open it up in Lightroom.
We have Jean with his more punny comments. He says, the Batz flow. That's how she roll.
I'm now going to say that to everybody. So
and earlier he called your husband the Batz man, which I guess is technically true.
Yeah, he's Mr. Batz.
Mr. Batz. We have a question from Sydney real quick. Ashley, did you take this photo from a drone, a camera, or a roof? Or a camera on a roof?
Oh, I was in my apartment looking down on the street.
Nice.
So 3rd floor, and using my 5D Mark IV, I think I was on the 24-70. The reason being I wasn't sure if I wanted to zoom in a bit or keep it wide open in terms of my focal length. So I think I was splitting the difference a lot and maybe shooting at 50, but just wanted that potential to really make it a wide shot.
Nice.
All right, you ready to try some different edits?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. So the first thing I always do, I don't know about you, but I love to do a lens correction. And this has been really monumental for me in terms of, you can already tell that when you don't enable it, and then when you do, it really brings that image back to the amount of like flatness that you're hoping to get. I just feel like those corrections are so important to do. Definitely. And any chromatic aberration is great to remove if it can.
Oh, that's a big one. I have that as a setting where anything I import, it's just turned on. Especially if you do HDR photography or you have very fine edges with light against it. I mean, there's a lot of chromatic aberration there, and that definitely helps.
Yeah. So I think what I'll want to do, and maybe you can tell me a bit about your process, is that I'll want to make some virtual copies, so that we could try a few edits. And I wonder if, should we just do maybe a color and a black and white for each?
Yeah, let's do that. Sounds good. The good thing about virtual copies is we can make as many as we want, and I believe they don't take any space, so it's not like you're making another file. So literally the possibilities are endless on how we want to approach the edits.
Exactly. So what I just did was I synced everything to have a lens correction, and I know you have a preset so that it does that already, but that's all I just did just there, was select all of them, and I hadn't done any sort of editing on this image. So when you sync to a specific image, it just copies all of that information. So all I did was a lens correction. So now I'm going to just select all of them. I'm going to right click and I'm going to create virtual copies.
Boom, that easy.
And you'll notice that it says 1 of 2, 1 of 2, 1 of 2, 1 of 2, just so you know that there are 2. All right, so I think one of the most important things you can do is crop. And something that I learned a little bit later in my career, which is fairly embarrassing, is that a digital image needs to be cropped because it is its own interesting dimension. So if you don't crop it, it will be an odd size. So I think everyone should always crop their images unless you want it to be an interesting odd size. But so my favorites are 4x5 and 5x7, and it really just depends on maybe how close you got or where you want to print it at. My favorite is 4x5 in a lot of ways because it emulates a medium format camera, and I just love looking at magazine images, which are typically that size. So that's what we're going to edit right now.
Cool. We have a comment saying photographers want to remove chromatic aberration while CG artists always add it in. That's very true.
I believe that. That's some J.J. Abrams stuff.
Yeah, it's kind of the
All he
trendy
wants.
effect, that and like the glitch with chromatic aberration. It's, yeah, but there's a lot of truth behind that, Jean. Well said, my friend.
So I cropped this to 4x5 just to start seeing. And the name of the game is really to draw the eye exactly where you, the photographer, want people to see. So something that I love doing is actually putting things in front of my frame. So if you can see my cursor on the left-hand side, this is part of our fire escape. And for me, it being able to shoot past things or through things gives yourself, as a viewer, the opportunity to feel like you're there, to feel like maybe sometimes you shouldn't be there, or maybe you're being a little bit sneaky. But I think it gives a lot of grounding, and I'm curious to hear if people feel the same way too, but that's the sense that I get. And it's kind of cool because our normal eye doesn't see that way.
Right.
So it's fun that the camera does.
Yeah, that's awesome insights. Thank you for explaining why it is you did that. I mean, anybody could look at that and be like, was that intentional? Was that unintentional? And I think even you explaining it right there on why it is that you chose to do that. I like the comment that you said is, should we be there? Yeah, I do agree that it gives grounding. Let us know in the chat. What do you think about adding foreground elements like that in the photos? Do you think it adds to it, or what are your insights on that?
So I'm just taking a look here, and I think that everything up here is a bit distracting. So I'm going to just start zooming in and see if that does anything. And as I do that, wow, that's a whole different image.
Oh, yeah.
Isn't that fun? So now it feels like I didn't mean to catch him up here, and I don't see anyone else. I think that's really interesting to me. I'm just going to move something around here. Great. But I think that's a good start. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to sync that crop there. As you can see, I have it toggled on here, just so that when I make a second edit, I can also go through it. So, yeah. Oops. What happened? There you go. So let's do a color edit first.
Okay.
And again, the first thing I always do is the lens corrections, which we have already done. And then in terms of color, I like to go down the line a bit, but I always love to warm up my image. I think that I gravitate towards a more filmic look, and a lot of film is warm. So just for reference, daylight is actually 5200. And then I usually start from there and then go, I slide it over and just go too far and then dial it back. And I think that's something we talked about yesterday, is how far is too far? Well,
oh, yeah.
Because it's digital, go as far as you want.
Yeah, that's
and
a great
then
tip.
Start dialing it back.
That's the great thing about these sliders that is evident across a lot of Adobe's apps, but there's so many finite values and numbers you can do, and how do you know which one's the right one? Well, a good thing to do is just push it to the extreme and then start dialing it back and see what works. You kind of find that it's easier to find that middle ground of what's too extreme and what's too light.
Yeah. And with the tint, I like to keep it a very light touch. Greens and magentas tend to not do great on folks' skin, so right. I try to keep it as neutral as possible. And then now we're in the next phase, and usually I would say that I actually bring my contrast down a bunch. But for the purpose of this project, and I think you saw it in the final image, it's really crunchy. And I wanted that because I wanted the grit of the street. I wanted the shadows. I wanted the details, and yeah, I wanted that darkness. So I'm actually going to bring it up quite a bit. Again, I'm going to bring it even more than I need to, just to check, and then dial it back until I feel like that's all you need to do. A really great tool is the highlights tool, and I usually start it at 0 just to check it out. And I think it's such a wonderful tool to use, especially when you think that maybe you've blown something out a bit and you need to bring it back. And again, with a more filmic approach, you really don't have many highlights unless, you know, it's a really contrasty image. So again, I'm just dialing it back. I'm going too far and then dialing it back.
So right now, we've done a lot. Shooting raw. There's so much data to play around with.
Yeah. And now I'm just going to drop my shadows because again, for me, and if we were to go back to our mood board, I would say that shadows were such an important piece of that mood and the feeling that I was trying to evoke. So I think really bringing those back in is important. And as you can tell, like this whole area on my right-hand side that we've worked on is wildly different than where we started. So there's a lot you can do. And something that I love to add is some texture. Not too much, but again, here's what too much looks like.
Like it's super gritty.
Yeah, it's kind of like my little sharpen tool in Lightroom. And then again, I also suggest if you don't know what a tool is, to play around. So clarity is a little different than texture. In fact, most times I'm actually removing some clarity to make it feel a bit more filmic. So I'm going to leave it right there, but keep the texture high. And then something cool to know is that saturation affects the whole image, and vibrance affects part of the image. It doesn't affect the skin as much. It still does, but I've noticed that vibrance has been really helpful when you're trying to affect different parts of the image.
Yeah, saturation is just the blanket saturation across the entire image. Vibrance will choose, I forget the algorithm or what exactly it targets, but I do know it saves the skin tones, which is a big one, and why I usually find myself using vibrance first and then maybe the tiniest bit of saturation.
Nice. So there's a lot of things that you can also do in here. So you'll notice that there's a tone curve in here, which is also very similar to Photoshop. So for all the folks that may be a little bit hesitant to use Photoshop, I swear it's just the same. And you can do a lot of the same things in both places too. So if you want to get a little bit more in depth here, we could make a little bit of an S-curve. So you could take the highlights and pull them up. And you'll notice that in my highlights, in the region area here, it got pulled up. And then you'll go to your shadows, and then you'll pull it down. And then again, you could once you bring this into Photoshop, you can do the same thing all over again. How are we looking so far?
It's looking great. Let's see the before and after. I always love doing this. I think there's shortcut. So in your keyboard, it's the one between the delete and return. I always forget what it's called, whether it's backslash or I don't want to get crucified in the chat here for calling it the wrong thing, but it's that I think it's the backslash. I don't know. But that's the shortcut. Yeah, there we go.
There you go.
Yeah. So that's already made a huge difference. And even when you started with the crop, I mean, we started out with a completely different image, and just by doing that crop, we have a totally different composition and photo, which it's looking awesome.
I mean, it's looking great already. And which is fun because I didn't intend to use this photo. So the fact that we were able to change it up a little bit and find a space for it, I'm really happy about it.
Nice. And we have a comment in the chat saying, I like how the man in orange mirrors our subject, which is true. I didn't even notice that.
Yeah, there he is.
Yeah, it's good symmetry.
I like that too.
We have a couple more friends joining in the chat. Sorry, Ashley. I just want to shout out some friends. We have Mohammed joining. Sydney saying, hey, what's up? Welcome. Thank you for joining us. Engage with us. One thing I didn't call out that I'm just going to plug real quick is the artist spotlight. So 30 minutes before this show ends, which is 11:30 a.m. Pacific time, we're going to jump into an artist spotlight. So we're going to feature one of our creatives that's part of Behance and joins our chat and see what work they've done and give them a shout out and give them some love. If you think you should call out or highlight anybody in our community, go ahead and hit that artist spotlight tab up above and submit their portfolio, and they could have a chance to be spotlighted in our show.
Woo! That sounds fun.
Fun stuff.
All right, so I just went into our color area here, and I just punched up the red a bit because I noticed that I had some red and I really liked it. So it's just going to affect anything that is red. And again, with the backslash, I'm just going to call it backslash now.
Yeah, let's just call it that for today. I think it's a backslash. We'll see.
You can see that we've punched that up a bit. Yeah, so that's a good first take at that image. And now we're going to try a black and white.
Let's do it.
All right. So you can check your black and white presets. And I love hovering over just to see what people have done, what maybe we're thinking about. It's a great start to just take a look.
Yeah, it's a great feature.
Yeah, that's always really fun.
We are moving away from color, but we did have a question pop up from Nora saying, I want to know how to use saturation effectively.
Ooh, I think just be really light with it. And, you know, because I think we chatted about that it affects the whole image. So just to be very light with your use of saturation, and it'll really go a long way. Whether that's adding a little bit or actually desaturating a little bit. Depends on the mood.
Yeah, well said. I think one of the more common mistakes when people are color grading video or photo is just going extreme with that saturation. They think, make it pop, and just add way too much color. And that's very easily noticeable when something is way too saturated. So definitely go light on it. Don't go extreme. But as Ashley said, try a little bit or maybe even subtract it.
Yeah. I mean, having said that, we could actually just take this image and desaturate it all the way. There's a million ways to go into a black and white image, but so you could do that, or you could say black and white at the top here with your treatment area here. And so now we have a very neutral black and white image, and with black and white, just as color, there's so many things that you can do. So we're just going to quickly go through it again, but I'm going to do a similar thing where I add contrast. I'm going to take the highlights down a bit, bring back the shadows, meaning take it down, and maybe even just check what my blacks do. So again, the blacks and shadows slider will be different.
Oh yeah. Getting extra moody.
Oh yeah. And bring up that texture just a tiny bit. It does a lot. And then I like to bring down the clarity a little bit. And the cool thing about this area, which originally was a hue saturation levels area, is now you can still work on specific colors that used to be there. So this red area, which is in the bus lane at that top right, I can still affect it just in varying shades of gray. So I can choose to draw the eye there or not. And I'm going to keep it pretty low. And again, we've got our lens corrections on still. And that's a good first start. Here's before and after.
There it is. It's looking great.
Great. Well, let's get into the real image, huh?
Let's do it. Here it is. Is this the same one we edited yesterday?
It is. We chose the same one, which is great. So I'm just going to take a look. These are all of the comp images. So we're going to composite these birds into Photoshop eventually. But this is the main image. And I think the reason why I really liked it is that I'm shooting a bit off kilter, which is something that I also don't normally do. I really like clean lines. I'm really drawn to keeping things in order a bit. But for the purpose of this project, it was supposed to feel a bit, you know, dystopian, or something was off, and also maybe a little bit more in the moment. So I think finding that motion for yourself, even when you're shooting, is really great. And something that you can do if you maybe missed it is to even rotate it even further to really hero that out.
Oh yeah.
If you wanted to. But for me, I kind of liked where we were. And so I'm going to undo that. But again, like between the crop or rotation, I think you can find some new mood when you're in this process, which is checking out to see where you can take an image. So we're going to do the color.
We do have a question in the chat, Ashley, about Photoshop versus Lightroom. Are you ready for it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So it's maybe I missed an explanation for this since I joined late, but when do you use Lightroom versus Photoshop for editing photos?
It's a great question.
Agreed.
I think the great thing about all these products is that you can come up with your own system of how you'd like to use them. And so my current process is that after I do a shoot, sometimes I'm shooting to a capture, but I will pull everything into Bridge. I suggest that you find whatever product that you need to be able to cull, and that's just where you cull. And then I pull all of those images that I've chosen into Lightroom, and I do kind of a spec work where I am editing the image and just seeing where I can take it. From there, I'll open it into Photoshop and do my final work where I feel more comfortable removing things, changing things up a bit. But there are many tools in Lightroom itself that you could just do the whole image in here and export it and be done. So I hope that's helpful.
Yeah, I think it is. Very well said.
Yeah, and sometimes I have a quick job that they haven't asked me to do any sort of post-production, and so I'll pull my images into Lightroom, I'll export them there and just make sure that they have the images that they need. So again, it's different strokes. So
sweet.
All right, so I like a warm image, as we talked about. So I'm going to warm this up. I'm going to warm it up more than I ever needed to warm it up, and then start dialing it back down. And again, for reference, daylight is 5200 Kelvin. So that's always a good spot to start in. So I'm going to bring it probably around there. And I feel like that already changes the image a lot for me.
100%.
Yeah. And then I'll just make sure the tint is in the right place. Again, I want it to be a bit warmer. So if I bring in the magentas, it's going to really hero out the reds in this image, which I love. And something we didn't talk about before is the exposure, but I'm typically trying to find the right exposure for myself in camera, but you can always check it out, and you can always check this histogram here to make sure you have all the information that you need. And you can tell that it changes the histogram up top as you toggle it to be more underexposed or overexposed. And Adobe does a great job of showing you maybe where you've hit that spot. So I'm just putting my cursor over this triangle in the highlights area, and it's showing me what's overexposed, which is great to know. So I'm just gonna lighten it up a bit. Check it out. Still looking really good. And I'm gonna add a bunch of contrast. And again, the reason is that I want that crunch and I want to see the grit and I want to see as much as I can.
We're team contrast for this shoot.
Right? And again, I'll always go back and just finesse different things. So I lightened it up in exposure, but now I think I want it a bit darker because I thought I was losing some of the shadow. And then again, with highlights, I always take it all the way down and then bring it up to a point that I like. And that feels pretty good to me. Shadows, same thing. I start walking it back. And then one moment I'll go all the way out just to make sure. And I think I keep wanting to bring those shadows back in. And so whites are also different than the highlights slider. So I encourage you to see what the difference is there for you. If I find that something's still a bit overexposed, I might work on the whites spectrum here, but more often than not, I'm not touching it. And then I'm gonna bring the blacks in too. And just like before, add some texture, see what's too much. Ooh, that's too much. It's very filmic though.
Yeah.
And then dial it back. And then let's add some vibrance. I really want to see the vibrance of the street and all of the paint on the floor and the market sign and the parking meters and all of that. So I'm going with that. And I'm going to do a little bit of an S-curve on the normal area here in our tone. So you can do it here or you can do it in here in this area. So I'm just going to do it down here just to show that you can do both. I'm bringing up my highlights a little bit, bringing down my darks a little bit. And now that's a really slight S-curve because we've also done it up here. So you can always do one or the other or both, depending on if you need to layer on some more, take some things away. I think it's really great to find the tools that speak to you the most. And then adding some saturation here. So let's check a before. Very neutral image. Yep. Really cool. Almost feels like I shot it in log for some reason. I don't know
almost.
How. Yeah. Almost. And then the after. It's quite different.
The warmth adds a lot to the image.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like I'm paying more attention.
Yeah. The red really gets highlighted too, which I think, yeah, the red's kind of there. Yeah. Looks really good.
That's nice. So
what do we think, chat? What do we think about the before and after so far? Let us know how this edit is coming along. I think it's looking great.
Tell me.
Tell us now. Catch up to the present with us.
I know. All you past people, hurry up. So I just chose the second image in our virtual copy, and I'm just going to sync those, knowing that I liked that edit. So I just want to make sure that that we affect the ones that we affect. So there we go. So now we can go back into a black and white edit, and I'm very curious because I've actually not edited this in black and white. And it might change my mind. We'll find out.
Ooh, let's find out. It's the beauty of doing it live.
We'll do it live.
We'll do it live.
So I'm going to change it to black and white here, which is really easy. I have my lens corrections on. I always like to make sure. I think that really changes the name. If you walk away from this live stream, please just do your lens corrections. That's the one thing I can tell you to do.
Pro tip by Ashley Batz, everybody. Turn those lens corrections on.
I don't know what it is, but I feel like, ooh, just got it a little bit more. So we're in our black and white treatment. And again, with temperature, it still will change things. So don't be afraid to get in here and see what it does. And again, it's all to taste. There's so many different kinds of black and white images that are based in film stocks that have been cultivated over many, many years. So I highly recommend that you maybe find a couple that you really love and try to emulate and work from there. So I'm just bringing that contrast back in. I really want to see what's going on and maybe turn it down a bit in exposure. I felt like I was missing some of it. And then again, take the highlights down, and I like to walk it back up.
I think that's another great tip that if you folks are going to come away with something is with those sliders, just take it to the extreme and then walk it back and find where that good middle ground is or to what your liking is once you've seen the extreme version of it. It's a great workflow.
I'm curious what you do with your landscape imagery that you create. Do you do a lot of that kind of slider type of work just to walk it in and walk it out?
I do a lot. I tend to go towards this high dynamic range look with photography, especially with my landscape. So what I find myself a lot is taking the highlights down and the shadows up. But the shadows, I think, can really make it just look a little too unnatural for my liking. So it's the same thing. It's to the extreme and then dial it back with the shadows. And then S-curve. I really love S-curves. That's my thing with landscape. Got to make all those highlights and shadows contrast with each other. That's kind of the look I usually go for.
Awesome. And I think the cool thing is that you can start going down that rabbit hole of what that looks like for yourself, and you'll end up on the other side with your own look and feel, and that'll just be unique to you.
100%.
So let's just take a quick look at our before, which I know is color, and then after. But something that I wanted to call out specifically with this black and white is that I went into the black and white mix here, and previously in this image, I actually took down the red.
Right.
But here, I really missed it in a lot of ways, so I brought it back up. And I think for me, this was really helpful in making that delineation of here's this stripe going horizontally, here's this piece of metal going vertically. Things are very architectural, even if I'm shooting a bit off kilter. So I think just paying attention to those little details, and again, slowing down, using Lightroom as one thing, using Bridge as another thing, will be really helpful for you to just take in those moments and also appreciate the work that you've done. Like, oh wow, I was really happy with that.
Agreed. Well said.
Thank you. So I'm feeling pretty good about that. Is there anything else we'd want to look at in terms of this image in black and white? What are your thoughts?
I think it's looking pretty good. I like how you changed the red line. It seems to match that square perpendicular platform that Mr. Batsman is standing on a little more. I think before it was very contrasting, but now they just seem to look a lot more alike.
Yeah, I agree. So I'm going to grab those 3 images and I'm going to sync them.
Sync.
Because in the event that I want to do a second version where I comp in the pigeons flying through, I have the similar settings. So let's just take a quick look at what we've done, and let's start from the top. So we originally cropped this, which was great. I thought this image was a goner. I was like, oh, I don't like it at all. So I'm glad that we got in there and tried some things and shed some new light on it. So that was our foray into a black and white and a color image. And I think it's actually looking pretty great.
I agree. And that was a great tip with the crop. And I think it's Lightroom, the right panel is kind of formulated to work from a top-down approach, which if you could see the crop is one of the top things. So they want the usual workflow is like start with the crop first, then do the global adjustments, color, go down the tone, go down the S curves. And I think that's one thing I encourage people to do is just like Ashley said, that picture she thought was a goner, but you give it a crop and it almost turns into a totally different photo that came out super sweet. So definitely mess with that crop when you're looking at your photos first, just to see if it gives it a different composition. And it may or may not work, but I mean, this was a great example of where it could work just by giving it a totally different crop.
Totally. I mean, and you could get real weird with it if you really wanted to. And sometimes I take the crop off and just make it even weirder.
Oh, we're getting super weird now.
Oh yeah. Like, what does that feel like? And you can see that it will change the image on the left-hand side as a preview.
Right. But
who knows? You never know. This could be your new iPhone screen.
There it is. The Batsman.
All right, so here we go. Just looking back through again, just to make sure I'm liking where this is going. And here's our black and white version. I think I rotated it a bit on accident, which is totally fine. I actually like this rotation more, so that's good to know. Yeah, all is looking good. I'm feeling like we did some things. And you can make tons of presets. I've got a ton over here that emulate different film stocks. So you could add a bunch of grain. You could change the way an image looks pretty immediately. So totally encourage you to try different things, see what resonates with you. And before you know it, you'll have a whole body of work that is really consistent and feels like one human being shot it. So that's always fun.
Yep. It's a big one. We're getting some questions flowing in the chat. You want to answer some questions real quick?
I would love to.
Cool. We got a question from Moat Avoid. Do you ever use the target adjustment tool in the color section, or do you always do it color by color?
I typically go color by color, and mostly because I use Lightroom for a very specific reason, which is either to batch edit or to just spec it out, just to see where I could take it in Photoshop. A lot of my work is captured to another program where I can really target colors, or I'm going into Photoshop and going very granularly into a specific color. So I'm typically in this arena checking out the hue, saturation, and luminance, and you can dial those in really well there. Yeah.
Nice. We got another question from our very own Wade. Ashley, would you ever mix the two? For instance, leave the red line and Batsman in color and everything else black and white?
Ooh, I think that could be really interesting. I think for my projects in general, I don't typically deviate from what may seem like the natural world, but I do see that there's a place and a time for all things related. So that could feel a bit more collagey, which is really cool. You could even get as far into making it feel like you pieced it together. But I think that's a really great idea.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah.
We got another one about what's your stance on vignettes? Do you use them? Yes or no? Why not?
Ooh.
I'm curious now. Do you like vignettes?
Let's go find some vignettes. Let's go into the effects tab here. I am not a fan of vignettes because I think that it's a little bit formulaic to add that, and you could do well with maybe a different option like burning or adding a little bit of a gradient. But something that I started to do, and this will not work for this particular project, is I actually do a reverse vignette a lot. And if I'm shooting someone on white, then you can reverse vignette, and it kind of makes it feel a bit ethereal and otherworldly. But let's just check out what a real vignette looks like here. For me, it looks like I'm about to, like my world is closing in on me and I'm about to pass out. So I might not use it, but I know a lot of people that do. And I think it's a really great tool to use.
Yeah, personal choice for sure. Definitely kind of hones in on the middle of a photo, but I think it's also easy to overdo the vignette. You do see a lot of people using it, and just because everybody's using it doesn't mean you have to use it.
Right. Yeah. Again, you can, and that's a great thing about digital. You can pull it all the way in and see what that looks like.
Right.
And walk it back until you find that there's a way in which you would use it. So, and I have it on and it's still not bothering me. So I guess that's a good thing.
Something.
It's something. Let's talk about grain real fast. I love grain. I love grain. So I definitely add grain to all of my images. And again, that's just continuing to add the right kinds of texture that isn't so heavy-handed. So I love having some grain on most of my images. It helps it feel a bit more filmic, helps me feel that it's a little bit more tactile. Highly recommend adding grain and seeing what that does. And we can zoom in too, and we can change the size to make it really big. And once we add grain, you can see that it can really, really affect an image.
Oh yeah. Correct me if I'm wrong, Ashley, but it seems like you draw a lot of inspiration from the filmic type of shooting. Did you used to shoot film that you've kind of translated over to the digital world?
Yeah. I started shooting when I was 14 years old.
Oh, wow.
And I didn't really know what I was doing, but for some reason, holding a camera and telling people what to do felt really good.
Just felt right.
Just felt right. And yeah, I don't think digital cameras came out until I was well into my later teens. So I was shooting film for almost a decade before I got my hands on a digital camera. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and I think it's really interesting to hear other people's processes, but I try to get everything fairly right in camera for myself. But now that I've been doing a decade plus of digital photography, I've really learned how to use the tools that I have in front of me, meaning a digital image, and maybe creating it in a way that will give me the best bandwidth to edit it in the ways that I need to edit it. So maybe in the past I might overexpose or underexpose on purpose, but maybe I can find that that balance so that when I pull it into Lightroom or Photoshop, that I can still have the effect that I wanted to, but not lose any information, which I think is really important.
Right.
So now that I added some grain, I just want to make sure that I apply it to my other images. So I'm just going to command click the images I want it to affect and say sync. This will come up, which is super helpful just to make sure. And I'm going to make sure that everything is synced that I want to be synced. And I think it'll be really important when you sync and you want to make sure that some of the any sort of like spot removal that you've done applies to things like that, or doesn't apply if you've moved the camera, so you just don't want it to copy over. But I'm actually not really great at using these tools here, and that's why I use it in Photoshop.
Different strokes for different folks.
Absolutely. So I feel really proud of all of the images that we've worked on, and would love to maybe at least start taking it into Photoshop if we have some time before our next thing.
Yeah, 100%. We got about 15 minutes before we're going to jump into the artist spotlight. So we have some time to do that, and then we can cover the artist spotlight, and we'll probably have about 10 more minutes to do anything else that we want to.
Perfect. So I'm just going to take these 3 images and export them. And I'm going to export it to my desktop just to make it easy. But usually I'm pretty crazy about my organization. I rename everything, all kinds of stuff. But I think because we're just working on it for fun, totally fine to do whatever you need to do. And then in terms of sizing, I always resize to a long edge so that Adobe does the work for me on the other side because I am terrible at math. But I'm going to keep it fairly large just for fun.
As I said, let's look at this real quick with the export settings. So you prefer to do long edge, correct?
Yes.
Right. And then that is pretty much going to do it. So it's 4,200 pixels wide. And then I guess, like you said, the math will figure out what the height is.
Yeah.
But that's what I use as well. I think it's very, very useful because you got to know your output, right? I mean, you necessarily don't need a crazy high megapixel if it's going to go to social media. So usually I'll optimize it, and I optimize it by long edge. You just tell it how you want the length to be in pixels. So
yeah, and I always make sure the pixels per inch is pretty high too, just in case you want to print it.
Right. And with the file settings, curious to know in the quality, is there a certain reason why you chose 60, or what's the reasoning besides doing that as opposed to like 100?
Oh, actually, this will be at 100. And I know that eats up the file size, which we can talk about. But I think when you want to edit an image, having the highest quality of everything is really important.
Right.
The norm is just, I think it starts at 60 and then you go from there.
Right.
And I do sRGB, but I'm curious to see what other folks work in terms of color space, but that seems to be working for me these days.
Cool.
And I don't sharpen for screen, but I think there is a time and a place to do that.
Awesome. Looks good.
Great. Let's export.
Let's export. And then while we're exporting, we touched up a little bit on this yesterday. We have a question from Lonnie asking, how do you stay motivated while working at home and potentially staring at screens all day?
Oh, man.
Yeah, preaching to the choir, my friend.
I feel like we joked about this, but I was like, oh, we should all do a group stretch during the live stream. But it really is important, not only for your eyeballs to get up and move around and stretch and not look at a screen, but again, I'm always about optimizing for me to feel good. And so I will walk away from an image and come back to it and be surprised at the work that I did, or stoked or more excited again. So I think it's really important to get up, walk around, stretch, drink water. Yeah, take your eyes off the screen every once in a while.
Yes. Take a lap. Take a mental lap. Take a lap for physical activity. You got to get away from those screens. I mean, personally, I spend way too much time on screens, whether it's work or even photo editing or video editing. I mean, that's all on screen. So you just gotta take care of yourself. Spend some time outside.
I agree. I'm just going to export this into an edit to folder just to make sure. Sometimes things don't pop up on my desktop when I ask them to. It's a new computer. I'm learning. All right. So here is our edit, and I'm just going to pull it into the desktop real quick and then Photoshop. Let's reopen. Great. So I feel like it's like deja vu all over again.
Back. Time warped.
Here we are. And let's just take a quick look at what I did. And look how different it is. This is my third time looking at this image, and it's already feels so different. And I feel like I like it more every time.
Yeah, that was yesterday's edit that we did. And here's the one we did. I mean, I think immediately off the bat, the one in Lightroom is definitely more warm. Yeah. Which
I actually think I like, and I think I want to keep going with it. So no shame in going back and editing an image and You can always make sure that you have layers in a way that you could retroactively work on something like color specifically. Is really easy to go back into a Photoshop file and work on it. So that's
Right.
I might do this, you know, the rest of the day. We'll find out.
Yeah, I've re-edited
So,
the same photos in the past, and you almost always never get the exact same result. It's funny
right?
how that works out. It's just a different edit. And yeah, like you said, most of the time I'm like, I like round 2 better.
Yeah, I do. So I just pulled in immediately the secondary bird image, and it came in as a smart object. So I'm just going to rasterize the layer so that I can work on it. And I don't want all of this image. So I'm going to take down the opacity to see where it is in space. And I'm going to hit Command T so that I can work with it and maybe align it a bit better with what we did shoot, so that I can just paint it in with a layer mask and have it look like it was always there. Gotta move my zoom screen. Okay, here we go. And now I'm just pulling the edges a bit. I'm really just hoping that it works in the area that I'm going to paint back in. And it looks pretty good there. So I'm gonna hit enter. I'm gonna bring the opacity back up. So that's that image. I'm gonna create a layer mask. And currently, when the layer mask shows white, it's gonna show everything that you see is white in the layer mask. So I don't want that. I wanna just show what I want to show. So I'm gonna hit Command I to invert it. And now we're back at my base image. And with a white paintbrush, I can paint it back in.
Here's our bird friend.
And then you can get in there and make sure it's affecting only where you want it to affect. You could go back to a black brush and just paint out, you know, anything else just in case. And an easy way to toggle between white and black is to hit X. If you see on my left-hand side, I am doing that. So now I'm on a black brush, now I'm on a white brush. That's always a fun, easy trick.
Yeah, I love shortcuts. They are time savers.
Yeah. I know. And if you know a couple, it'll go a long way. So now I'm just going to pull in my other comp image that I wanted to bring in. Oh, and before I forget, there was a shadow of the bird that I wanted to bring in. And so let's just make sure I know where that is. So I'm just going to take a look. It's on this left-hand side here, in like the third concrete area. That's fun. So with a white brush, making sure that it's white on the left-hand side, I'm just going to paint that in.
You're like 5 for 5 and just nailing it. I mean, you know the general direction, but you're just spot on each time.
Oh, I honestly, I feel like I like making things hard for myself because it feels like a game, or it feels like I'm being more skillful, but I don't recommend it. So just so you all know. All right, so bringing this image back in, I'm going to right click it. I'm going to rasterize it, and I'm going to take the opacity down to see where it is in space. I'm going to hit Command T to make sure I know where I want it to go. And my goal is really just to line up the white lines, which is a great guide for me, so that when I do paint it in, it feels like that bird has always been there. And I'm just using the up and down keys to make it a bit more specific. And that looks pretty good to me. You can always zoom in. And so layer mask. You could also do the layer mask on the opacity that you currently are at, so that you know, if you needed to dial it back, you could, but I like to go for it.
Why not?
And
Let's
here's
go
my
for
bird.
it. There it is.
Again, making it difficult for no reason.
Well, it worked again. You're now 6 for
And
6, so.
thank you so much. So there's my second bird, and I want to double check on the image where that shadow is.
It might be off frame, isn't it?
No, it's right
Oh,
here.
there it is. Oh, nice. I thought that was from the other bird.
No, I know. It's because of the light, that high noon.
Yeah.
Yeah, it'll do that. So with a smaller brush, I'm just going to paint it in here. Well, my Bob Ross references from yesterday.
Happy little shadows.
And we just started a first comp. It's looking good already.
It's looking good. Agreed.
I think something that I mentioned yesterday and in general is that if you really want to make composites more, efficient and easy for yourself, lock your camera on a tripod, make sure that it's in the same place so that all you need to do is put a layer mask on and just paint it in. For me, it was really easy just because we had those guiding lines of the bus lane. So I felt like, oh, okay, I think I can do that. But always assessing where you're at and what you need is important too. And managing expectations for yourself, or if you have a client and they say, well, I'd love to paint those birds in, and you say, well, I didn't shoot it on a tripod and I think that would be really difficult. So always okay to say. Perfect. So now I'm going to work off of this layer, and I'm going to Command J to make a copy of all of it, and then zip it up into one layer by saying Command E. And I'm going to say this is my, this is my foundation. So I'm just going to call it foundation image just so I know that's what I'm going to go back to. And for some reason that I don't like it, I can trash it and then go back to these layers that are saved.
Yeah, it's kind of like our checkpoint, right? It's like game saved. Here's the next chapter.
Yeah. And how are we doing on time, by the way? Are we okay?
Yeah, we have about 2 minutes left before we got to go to Artist Spotlight. So maybe we can do a quick edit or whatever it is you were going to move along with. But we have about 2 minutes.
Well, let's just do an empty layer and just do some cleanup. And maybe if folks have any questions, that'd be great. If or comments, things that they'd want me to clean up, then we can do that.
Yeah, we actually do have a comment. It's from Stuart saying, isn't the conflicting shadows cause some perspective of mental conflict, one forward and one back?
Oh, from here?
Yeah, I'm not sure if I understand correctly. Do you know what he's saying? If not, we can ask to clarify a little bit.
I have a feeling that it just feels unnatural that this shadow is related to this bird and this shadow might be related to this one. It's quite possible that there was a bird that was even higher that I didn't see, but given the fact that my husband's shadow is really long, I'm going to say that it's probably related. But again, and I think we talked about this yesterday, because when I get into some of my removing of large objects like the cars, I decided to move a parking meter shadow in a way that was not natural. So again, personal preference. I think for me, having those little moments where maybe the viewer goes, how did they do that? Or this doesn't seem right. Like, why is it off? Will all ladder up to the mood that you're hoping to achieve. So again, personal preference. I just like the visuals of the shadows. I didn't ask many questions after that. So you never know.
Yeah. Cool. I will say it is about that time for the Artist Spotlight. So
let's do it.
Get into that. Let me just cue it up 1 second. Cool. So let me put it on my screen. Do you have it up on yours?
I sure do.
Oh, we're getting Streamception. Hold on a sec. Let me cue this up one more time. Here we go. Make that full screen. And cool. We are at the artist spotlight, who is from Sherry Lynn Felix. Congratulations, Sherry Lynn. We are going to spotlight your work. We're going to give it some love. Everybody in the chat, if you see Sherry Lynn's Felix and you like what you see, go ahead and give her a follow. She's got all her links up here. She's got Twitter, Behance, Facebook, Instagram, WordPress, and email. Wow, she's got all the social links. Good for you, Sherry. It's kind of like a one-size-fits-all. You can find them all right here. So, yeah, Ashley, so for this segment, we're just going to have a look at maybe one or two of her works, give some couple comments on it, hype it up, give her some love, and yeah, why don't we get into it?
Awesome. Well, at first glance, I'm very curious where you live, Sherry. It looks like a wonderful, idyllic place, and I'd like to be there right now. And also congrats on having all of your stuff in one place: Twitter, Behance, Facebook, Instagram, etc. That's like, you've really organized, which I like.
Yeah, it's a big one. I mean, when somebody goes to somebody's website and you want info on it, it's all right there. Sometimes you got to do a couple clicking, or sometimes it's even hard to find how to contact somebody, but she's got it right there front and center. Anything you could ever ask for, they're all her social links. So great job doing that. That was one of the first things I noticed.
Yeah, so fun. Well, it feels like at first glance that we are looking at a lot of different flowers and birds, sometimes butterflies and sometimes landscapes, but I'd love to dig into some flowers.
Okay.
Is there one that's maybe piquing your interest?
Yeah, I'm looking at selected for a show. Why don't we have a look at that?
Let's do it.
Cool. So it looks like we're diving into some macro photography. So are you? Yep, we're looking at the same one. I think this one really stands out for me. Yeah, that one right there. It almost has kind of that selective color that we were talking about a little bit earlier. It almost looks like everything else is black and white, but the focal point is to these red and greens of the bud of the flower. Really like it.
Yeah, and I'm loving the texture, and even though I'm very afraid of spiders, I think the spider web, or hopefully, I'm not sure what that is, but is actually really helpful and makes me get drawn into this a bit more. And Sherry also is doing something that I did in my first image in the batch, where you're using depth of field to bring you in and make you feel a bit more tactile. So I'm loving the things that are out of focus in this image as well. It's really drawing your eye in the places that you were hoping for people to look as well.
Yep. Agreed. All right, let's see what else we got. Oh, we got birdies now.
Yes. I love birds.
Cool. There's another one too.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
So cute.
What do we think of this image?
I am loving it. I feel like this was a really specific moment, like to have the bird almost touching down onto, it looks like a tree or a stump. But that feels like a very specific artistic choice to choose to move forward with this image. So that's really great to see. And again, I'm seeing some cool depth of field. I'm loving the color palettes. I feel like you're really good at honing in on that wash of color. And I'm so curious what Sherry did with the background. I mean, it's so soft and dappled and looks like streaks of light, and I'm just loving that.
Yeah, agreed with the depth. I mean, your eyes are immediately drawn into the foreground, which is the bird. And I didn't even notice that he was mid-step. That's a great call out. I think that's a very great artistic choice. I mean, any other normal picture would have his foot just kind of sitting there, but nope, he's just about to put his little foot there. So
I know.
Great timing. That was a good
So
shot.
fun.
Cool. All right, let's look at maybe one more project.
Okay.
Is there anything that sticks out in this portfolio? Well, she's got it all. She's got flora. She's got cityscapes.
I know.
Oh, this is a very comprehensive portfolio, Sherry. Great job.
Well, I'm just very curious, but if we scroll up to Scarlet Tan. I'm just so curious about this bird.
Scarlet Tan.
May
There we go.
2019.
Yep, got it.
I got to see this more close up.
Wow.
Wow.
This is, you gotta ask, I assume maybe Photoshop was used, again, with that selective coloring, but it's a very, very beautiful shot.
Yeah, and I mean, so many questions. First, you're in Central Park. That's amazing.
Mhm.
And I'm curious about your focal length, your shutter speed, because we are seeing some motion blur, but not too much. So you must be shooting really fast. And again, just that moment where the bird is just about to exit the branch, like one has like already released a bit, and that's really fun to see. Just that moment, and the bird's looking up. It's so cool to see.
Yeah. Yeah, this was a great creative choice to highlight the red from the bird and then put everything kind of sepia tone. Just came out great. All right, let's look at one more and then we can jump back into it. Kind of want to look at something that's city or landscape. Let's see. Cloud process. This one's catching my eye.
Let's do it.
Before and after adding sky. Ooh,
Oh,
okay, so
fun.
she's clearly a Photoshop user.
Wow.
Yeah. This is a very natural looking composition, especially with all the little fine lines from the bridge. Very talented, Sherry. You are a woman of many talents here.
Yes, I'm really curious about how she added the sky and the clouds. It feels very painterly. So
Yeah.
is that something that you did in Photoshop? How did you do it? I am mesmerized.
One thing I want to call out is you can see in this picture, there's not really any buildings back here, but it seems like she added them here. It's almost like she gave it a little more depth or more dehaze to cut through this just to make this work. So
Yeah.
Wow.
I know. I love that building that has a bit of bokeh where maybe it's some lights that have turned on. But it feels painterly and natural at the same time, and I'm loving the attention to light and shadow. And I mean, Bob Ross would be so happy with you right now.
Good friend Bob Ross.
I know.
Nice. Well, this is a very, very awesome portfolio, Sherry. Thank you so much for sharing it and being spotlighted. Again, go ahead in the chat, give her some love. Follow her links, give her a follow. They're all right here in one easy to find spot. This is a super cool portfolio.
Super cool. Way to go, Sherry.
Way to go, Sherry. Congratulations. Cool. We have about a little over 15 minutes left. I'm going to hop back onto your screen, Ashley. And yeah, let's take us home.
All right. Well, we're not going to be able to get through the edit of this, but I am really glad that, let's just back up a little bit, that we talked about my process, the idea, using a mood board, culling the images in Bridge, doing a first edit in Lightroom, and the fact that this is the third time that I've edited this, and I like it even more the third time, I think is testament to the fact that slowing down, taking the time, and really looking at your images and what you hope to get out of them will be really helpful for you in the future. So sometimes I will pull the original raw image into Photoshop and do it all over again and have the ability to change color even more. But at this moment, I'm really happy with what we did in Lightroom, so I'm happy to work on it as is. And again, there's so many ways that you can approach an image. I think just giving yourself the bandwidth to be able to go back or retroactively do something is your best bet.
Definitely.
So as part of that process, something that we talked about yesterday and I really want to hone in on is the markup, and taking some moments with your brain and your eyeballs to look at an image and see what you might want to remove or change will be really, really helpful. So I just opened an empty layer, and I'm going to take a brush and maybe just pick a color like maybe let's do an orange. And I'm just going to go through the image and mark up what things I might want to remove. And yesterday we did it on the image layer that I made like a secondary copy of, but today I'm on an empty layer. So I'm just going through and removing some things in my strategic mode here before I actually get in there. But for me, it's all about drawing the eye back to my subject, and anything that will detract from that, I think it'll be important to remove.
Yeah. We have a comment from the chat, Fairy, saying, I love the warm tones in this photo. I do too.
Thank you. Yeah, don't be afraid to warm an image up. That's what I say. And also, a lot of the time I'm using on my camera the cloudy white balance so that it already warms it up a little bit.
So you don't shoot with auto white balance. You always have a predefined Kelvin?
Sometimes, again, different strokes, but a lot of the time, if I feel like I need that instant gratification of maybe seeing where an image can go, I'll shoot on a certain white balance just so that I feel a bit more comfortable moving forward. But more often than not, I'm on cloudy. So again, just going through and making a mental markup for myself for the future so that I pay attention to those things again. I think sometimes we tend to fly through things and forget to remove things, and it's good to just have that. And again, if you're working with a retoucher, also really important to talk about that with them and show them a visual reference of what you're hoping to remove. And I think that maybe it's really important too to just hone your eye into things that you might remove and keep that as a visual dialogue that you continue to add through your work. So some people might say, I want to see more trash. So maybe their job versus taking away is actually adding more in. So can you take more images of things on grounds and cities and add it in, and then it's like, oh wow, it's this person standing in the middle of the street with a million newspapers on the ground, and that's a feeling in of its own too. So I'm just doing my little markups. I'm like, cigarette butts, you're out.
Later. Wish there were none, but you know, that's city life for you.
So that's why you have Photoshop.
Yeah, there you go.
Something that I really love and still love are the colors of the spray paint on the ground here. So I'm actually going to keep that. I think it's part of the visuals that I'm seeing with color in terms of the red here, the red of the sidewalk, of the street, all the way to the parking meter. So I'm seeing a thread of yellows and reds, and I want to make sure that I keep that. So that feels pretty good. I feel like I have a pretty good markup, and again, it's all about slowing down and taking the time. Also just having a reference for yourself at the end of the day, whether you look at this 10 years from now and you say, oh, I think I would have removed something a little bit differently. Always great to have that history for yourself.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. I think process has become the theme of this stream. The more we do something, the more that we start to perfect that process, so to say, to what it is that we want to do with the photo or the workflow. And I mean, even looking back, I mean, I'm sure you've done this and I'm very much have done this, but looking at our previous work compared to what it is today, we're like, wow, it's almost very motivating to see the progress. And I think even having these reference documents to be like, oh, it's interesting that I approached it this way, because now I'm more inclined to do it this way, or like, let's get back to basics and do it this way. So process is huge, people. I mean, it's one thing to just go out and start shooting, but you'll see that once you start planning appropriately for shoots, or once you start slowing down and getting that process right, you'll really start to see that workflow become a little more streamlined, a little more aligned with what it is that you want to do.
Yeah, I agree. And just being able to see that progress and even go back and change things up. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I've re-edited an image that I still love for my portfolio, but know that I can do it better and that it will be better served with this new edit once I've learned a few more things. So always going back, always reworking things, super important.
Yeah, agreed.
So I'm opening another empty layer and I'm calling it cleanup. And in the empty layer, you can't use all of the tools, but you can use some. And I really love to do a quick spot healing just to kind of get in the flow. Again, it's all about what your personal preference is, but it really does help me kind of get in there, feel like I'm affecting some change really quickly. And I'm using an Intuos Wacom tablet. I think it's the M, but I'm using my option and control keys to make the brush bigger and smaller as I go. And then as you go up and down, it changes the hardness too, so that I keep the hardness pretty low just to keep it really easy. But all you're doing is going through and just making sure you're removing the things that you said you were going to remove in your markup.
Nice. Going with the theme.
Yep. And I think we talked about this yesterday, but keeping it really small and detailed will give you the best way to remove something. Because if you do something really large, and it's using content aware, it might pick up more things than you want it to. So I think these tools are best served when using them in smaller doses.
Yeah, that's a great tip. And something we got to see a little bit of yesterday, but working in those small little nuances, you'll see it be a little bit more finite, a little more perfected than doing like an overall giant content aware, which may introduce some things that will make it look a little wonky.
Yeah.
Cool.
So it can do a lot, but not everything for you.
We have some friends chatting in the last few minutes of our show. We have Gideon saying hi, what's up? And we have Amy Hood. Amy, great to see you. They were live with us last week and are some Adobe Live seasoned vets and all around amazing graphic designers with Chutzpah Design. Good stuff. Thanks for joining us.
Hello. Oh, I feel so special now.
Yeah. Her and Jen, they're twins and they're just the ideal of the twin workflow. I have a twin brother too, actually. Fun fact. But the way they work together is next level. It's good stuff.
That's so cool. My cousins are twins and they're born in the same week as me, so I feel like a triplet.
Oh, nice. Yeah, another fun fact. We're actually 3 minutes apart, but technically 2 different days.
What?
Yeah. I was born at 11:59 and he was born at 12:01 a.m.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, but this, for the sake of our mom not going crazy and planning 2 separate parties for all of our youth, she's like, nope, one day.
Oh my gosh. That is so funny. So do you get your day or the next day?
We get his day technically, but they told me I'm older, so that was the compromise. But in reality, when you have twins, they're like, who's who? So they're like, you were born first, you're older, but it's his birthday. I was like, cool, yeah, sure, we'll take it.
Oh my gosh.
Amy says her and Jen are 1 minute apart, C-section. Yeah, we were C-section too.
Wow. Oh my gosh, I love twins so much. I wish I was one. I'm an honorable triplet.
Honorable triplet. That's pretty cool stuff too.
So something that I'm doing as I move around is clicking spacebar and then moving my pen to navigate where I want to go next. That's always been a helpful trick for me too.
Yeah. It's back to those shortcuts we were talking about. They're super useful.
Yeah, and then I came upon this and I was thinking that I wonder if I could remove it. So we're going to try. So I'm going to make my brush a bit bigger and try and do one sweeping motion, but sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. it
Looks
worked.
pretty good. Yeah.
Again, you just have to be prepared for all things.
Right.
Same thing with up here with there's 2 people and a dog. So not sure if that'll work or not. More often than times, it's better if you do it a bit more in a way that makes sense, but just try here. And you can see, actually, this is a great example that it picked up someone's shoe when thinking about how to fill in with what I didn't want. So I'm going to remove that. That's something that I'll do later. And you can always check our live stream from yesterday as to how I tackled a larger object. But I'm just going through and doing a quick cleanup. And I can always check my markup to see what I wanted to remove, which is super helpful. And I know it's tedious and no one wants to do it.
Yeah,
I don't even want to do
process,
it
right?
half the time.
All those things are what make a great edit. Even going as far back as that mood board that we initially set out to. I mean, that was a great source of inspiration and kind of like a light beacon on what to follow to stay true to the inspiration for this edit.
Yes, and I think that that's something that you can always go back to as well, is if you're feeling a bit stuck and you're not sure where to go next, you can always go back to your mood board or the original intent and take away what you took away when you're planning the shoot and say, well, how can I implement some of those ideas into my editing?
Right.
So that's great. So again, just cleaning up. Something that I always love to do is zoom out, because at the end of the day, someone's going to ingest an image by looking at it in full. And you can always check your work by toggling on and off. And I think the work that I've done is great so far in terms of really drawing your eye back to that center, which is my subject. And I also really love the shadows. I'm almost less looking at the birds, but I love the graphic shadows and the lines that are happening. So as long as I keep drawing everyone's eyes there, I'm good. Which, to that point, I really needed to remove that item because it was bothering me.
Yeah.
And just keep cleaning up. I think zooming in, zooming out, toggling on and off, checking your markup. I knew I had some things to remove here.
There's our nemesis, the receipt paper or possible diaper.
So this one will be interesting because it's right up against this concrete line.
Right.
I'm not sure if the spot healing will do it. And you don't want to go over it too many times, but it seems to do it in a way that I feel okay. And later on, I could bring that line back in. So I'm
you could always
add
the line back in. So it actually worked out.
Yeah. You just got to see what works and what doesn't. And the great thing about Photoshop is that there are a million tools to arrive at the same outcome. And so you can choose your own adventure in terms of how you want to go about it and what makes the most sense in your brain. I'm just going to remove some of this stuff in the tar to make it look even crazier. I mean, like, what kind of job was this? Like, what happened?
I don't know. I think they just drilled a giant hole and then just put a concrete rectangle slab over it. So we'll deal with it later.
Like, here's your floor. You got it.
All right, Ashley, we have about 1 minute left. Do we want to do a quick recap of what it is that we did and where we arrived to today before we sign off?
Absolutely. We were looking at this project that I did as a personal project in San Francisco, and this is a shot of my husband on a very empty street. And my goal was to make it feel even more empty. So we did a whole project where I made a mood board, I made a markup, I made some edits, and we arrived at this image, which is, where is it? Here it is.
There it is. It looks super empty and right on line with the theme that we were exploring from the mood board. So amazing job, Ashley. This has been an amazing 2 days working with you and seeing how you approach your photo editing wizardry with the process all the way down to the tools used. It's been really fun. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, it's been a great time. Stick around, everybody. I'm going to flash this schedule real quick because we still have a full day of live streams going on. We have the Illustrator Daily Creative Challenge next with Andrew Hockrattle. So stick around for that, along with the rest of the streams, taking us all the way to about 4 p.m. Pacific time. So we're going to go ahead and take off. Again, thank you, everybody, for joining us. It's been a great 2 days. Don't go anywhere because we have more shows. See you later.
Bye.
Bye.